Luke chapter 7, verses 1 to 10. After Jesus had ended all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. Now a centurion had a slave who was dear to him, who was sick and at the point of death. When he heard of Jesus, he sent to him elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his slave. And when they came to Jesus, they besought him earnestly, saying, "He is worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation, and he built us our synagogue." And Jesus went with them. And when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying to him, "Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume to come to you. But say the word, and let my servant be healed. For I am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my slave, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he marveled at him, and turned and said to the multitude that followed him, "I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." And when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the slave well. This is the gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Will you please be seated? Well, just thinking, before I say anything else this morning, I want to say that this is true. That this account is as it happened. That Luke is a faithful witness. As he says in the beginning of his gospel, he carefully researched everything before he wrote it down. And I say that because some people think these are fairy tales, or these are kind of, made up stories to make us feel good, or even that they are maybe partially true, but we don't know how true they are because, Chinese whispers, with Chinese whispers, the story gets kind of changed as it goes along. And it's been 2,000 years, and so it's been changed a lot. Rubbish. Absolute rubbish. These people knew what they were doing. They had memories that were much better than us. And not only that, they were under divine obligation to ensure that what they recorded was true. I didn't sell my house and go to the ministry 40 years ago for a fairy tale, okay? I didn't drag my family around the country to 5 parishes for a fairy tale. This is true. This is Jesus. This happened. So that's the first thing to say, okay? Very important. Now, in the second thing to say, that in the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 6, we read this, that without faith, it is impossible to please God. Without faith, without trusting God, it is impossible to please him. And this passage this morning is all about that kind of faith, that trust. And it's about the faith of all people, a centurion. We used to listen about Jews and people like that, and the Samaritans maybe, and the scribes and Pharisees. But this is a centurion. And it's about his faith and how that astonished Jesus. And we're told that Jesus had finished what some writers call the Sermon on the Plain. That's chapter 6. And if you read chapter 6, you'll find in some of it, some of the teachings that Jesus gave on the Sermon on the Mount. Well, he did that on the Mount. Well, this one he did on the plain. So they call it the Sermon on the Plain. And after giving these teachings to the crowd, they followed him, and he went into Capernaum. And as he entered Capernaum, some people came out to him, whom Luke calls the elders of the Jews. Now, elders was usually the title given to somebody who looked after the local synagogue. These are the people responsible for the upkeep of the synagogue and the running of it. And so these people came to see Jesus as he was coming into Capernaum. And unusually, they came to speak to him on behalf of a centurion. A centurion who we know as a God-fearer. When they're called God-fearers, these are Romans who didn't follow the usual gods like Zeus or in particular Mithras. Mithras was a favourite of the military because he was a very military kind of god. But this centurion didn't offer the sacrifices to Mithras or Zeus or any of the others, but instead he believed in God. How far that went, I don't know. Was he circumcised to become a Jew? We don't know. But certainly he was very sympathetic And he was obviously very interested in it, and he believed in God because we are told by the elders that he loves our nation, he loves the people of Israel. Again, that was unusual. And he built us our synagogue. So here is a man who went beyond just saying, I believe. He actually gave his money so they could build a synagogue. And what's more about this centurion is that he was obviously a very compassionate man, because we're told that the reason he sent the elders to Jesus was so that he can come and heal his slave. And Luke tells us that this slave was dear to him, and not only that was the point of death, he was dying. Now, you need to understand about centurions. They were people who were put in charge of about 100 soldiers, a century of soldiers. And he would have been promoted to become a centurion because he had been an exemplary soldier. He had served the empire well, had fought in many battles. And he was expected then to become a very strict commander of his troops. He would lead by example. In other words, he didn't send them into battle, he led them. And he was responsible for the discipline. And if you know anything about soldiers, discipline in those days was very important because they could be an unruly lot. And so he would have been a very strict man to be able to keep his soldiers in line. So here then, he was a battle-hardened man who would have been expected to be quite ruthless in certain situations, concerned for his slave's welfare. And a slave was nothing but a chattel, a piece of furniture. You know, they weren't considered to be anything more. They're not much of a human being. They were chattels. But this slave meant a lot to this man. And when the elders asked Jesus, and I find this quite stunning really, and asked for Jesus to help, we're told that he went straight away. There was no ifs and buts and anything like that. Well, this is the centurion or this is the Roman, an occupier. He went straight away. And as he was nearing the house, some of the centurion's friends actually came out to him with a message from the centurion himself. And this message itself is the extraordinary part of this story. Because the message of the centurion was this: Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume to come to you. But say the word, and let my servant be healed. For I am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my slave, do this, and he does it. And there are several things here that really stand up for me. And the first thing is that the centurion defers to Jesus as his superior. He says, Lord, which could be seen to be a very polite thing, sir, but it's a very deferential word, or it could be that he refers to him as Lord, meaning that he was God in some way, or a servant of God anyway. And if you give the situations of the Romans, who were the occupying force in the land, it was extraordinarily humble of him to say, I am now under your authority, when they had conquered the Jews and they were running the show. And yet he says to Jesus, Lord, I'm under your authority. And the second thing is here that I think it can only be the work of the Holy Spirit really, because he sees that the authority that he has is very temporal, in other words, earthly, from man, but he sees in Jesus a spiritual authority, a divine authority, which he recognizes as being far, far greater than his own. And so he recognizes that Jesus therefore has the spiritual authority to heal his slave. And then lastly, he trusts Jesus to have so much power that he only has to say a word. Doesn't he have to come into his house because he's not worthy to have him? He just says, just say the word and my servant will be healed. And I think that's extraordinary. If you think about saying a word, often they would use oil, or they would have these ceremonies or these rituals by which they did the healing and so on. But he says, say a word. And that reminds me of two things, really. The first thing it reminds me is that in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth, he did it with a word, didn't he? He said, let there be light, a word of command. And the other thing that reminds me is to jump forward to John 1, and it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So those two things kind of jump to mind, but all he says is, you just have to say the word, and I know it'll be healed. And Jesus' response here was to marvel, and he turns to the crowd who was with him, who had been following him, who must have been wondering what on earth to expect from this Roman soldier. And he says to them, I tell you that not even in Israel have I found such faith. Not even among God's own people have I found such faith and such trust. And I think those words are double-edged, actually. First, I think Jesus should be shocked by this, says so much about the state of his own people. Because they had their temple, they had the commandments of God, the oracles of God, they had their synagogues, they had religious practices. They were the most religious people on earth because everything was ruled by their faith. And yet they could not recognize when God had come as their Messiah in Jesus, and it was under their very nose. Of all people, they should have been welcoming Jesus with open arms. But despite all his miracles and all his teachings, they were skeptical and on the whole untrusting. And the question, I suppose, that one asked, really, are we like that today? Are we the church that really believes that God can do something special among us and for us? And I've been guilty as everybody else on catching the mood of the day. If you go to a governing body or you get together with any group of clergy, they're all moaning. Oh, the state of the church, and there's only half as many clergy now than there was when we first came into the ministry, and the parish share is going up and the congregations are going down, and people aren't giving, or people have stopped coming to church, and oh, woe is me. And it's hard not to catch that mood. Where is faith today? Where is trust in God? I think, what Jesus is doing is giving a gentle, like my father-in-law used to do, give me a clip across the head sometimes to make sure I was looking after his daughter. Clip across the head. That's what Jesus is doing. Come on. And on the other hand, Jesus is not just commending the faith of the centurion, but pointing to this as a demonstration of what faith is. Faith is resting upon, putting your whole expectation on, your trust on, everything on the person who you believe can do what you cannot do for yourself. That's what faith is. Leaning and trusting and depending on him. And the most beautiful explanation of that is that the Lord's my shepherd, isn't it? The Lord's my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in right pathways for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, even though times are going to be difficult and dark and dangerous, yet I believe that you're with me. And your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And then he goes through this kind of thing. He says, and you prepared a table before me in the presence of my enemies, those who are against me. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. And you anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. And surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, those are statements of faith. That you believe that God's goodness and mercy is with you. Even though you go through the difficult times, the valley of the shadow. Even though there are financial difficulties, the church is struggling, the country is struggling. We can't get a good leader for love or money. The NHS is a mess. The fridge is broken, the car's tyres have gone down, So-and-so is ill, our friends seem to be dying off, They're not good times. They're struggling times. Not as bad as some people, let's be honest. But do we trust that God is our shepherd, leading us through the hard times and the good times and the bad times? Do we trust him? Do we lean on him? This man did. It's extraordinary. And Jesus marveled, will I find such faith? Will he find such faith in us and in the church today? I really hope so, because without faith it's impossible to please God. And without faith we're not going to get out of this. and we're not going to get through it. So my message to you this morning is very simple. Trust God. Trust in Jesus. He can do extraordinary things in the lives of anybody that puts their trust in him.